Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are we getting on? Welcome to a brand new Starfield video. So, over the last month or so, Bethesda have released a whole load of new concept art for the upcoming Starfield release, and have also yesterday released a new video talking about the world that they're trying to build. So today we're going to take a look at that new video and all the things Bethesda have talked about this sort of tone and the setting and the universe that they're creating for us to explore in Starfield. So let's jump in and take a look, shall we? Okay then, so there's quite a lot of stuff to cover here. Originally I was going to go through all of this in one video. We're going to have a look at all the stuff in the new video that has just come out, and all of the concept art they've released over the last month or so as well. But there's just too much of it to cover in one video really. You'll be here for way too long and it'll be way too much. So I'm going to do it in two bits. So today we're going to have a look at the most recent stuff, the discussion around the universe that Bethesda are building, and then in a day or two we'll do a look at all the concept art and see what cool stuff we can see and what we can pull out of that. So it should be really interesting. So put your feet up, grab yourself a brew, and let's nerd out. Okay then, so yes, as I say, over the last month or so, Bethesda have shared a few bits and pieces. Obviously there's a few bits of concept art come out here and there. The Skyrim 10th anniversary concert they did a few weeks ago had the Starfield suite in it, so if you want to check out some of the music from the upcoming game, I'll link that down below and you can check that one out because there's some very, very cool stuff in there, along with some nice concept art in there, which we're going to have a look at in a bit. And yes, yesterday they released what looks to be the first video in a series. It's got a number 1 on it anyway, of videos with the developers talking about the process of making the game and the universe and so on and so forth. So, first up, one of the things Bethesda have been talking about a lot recently is the size and the lifespan of their games.
I think we underestimate how long people are going to play it.
So, obviously we know Skyrim's just hit its 10th anniversary, and that's a big thing, and although it's happening slightly more often these days, and we're seeing more games, including from other developers, have a longer lifespan than perhaps they used to in the past, in terms of their sort of replayability and ability to see things that you missed the first time around and all that sort of stuff. Skyrim's definitely one of the biggest on that, and Bethesda are not lost in sort of recognising that, and also to a lesser degree some of their other games as well. And it's something they're trying to bring into, we know TES 6 coming up in a few years, but also Starfield as well. They want it to be a massive game that we can keep playing for years on end, which is great if they can pull it off. They managed to do it without so much intending to, I suppose, in Skyrim, so promising hopefully for Starfield if they go in with that knowledge. It should mean that there'll be huge amounts in there, hopefully loads of stuff to discover, loads of quests to do, loads of little bits of places and stories to come across that perhaps you might miss if you turn left instead of right and that sort of thing. So definitely promising to hear things like that, and obviously it's the kind of mindset that underpins a lot of what Bethesda do these days, so very, very coul. So yeah, so relating to that, they have said in the past, Todd Howard's mentioned in the past, the whole idea of it being Skyrim in space, sort of. So I don't lock too much in on the Skyrim part, but in the sense of it being a big world that allows you to go wherever you want and find loads of little things to stumble across and stories and places to explore and things like that. That's more the mentality I think he's referring to, I think. Certainly seems to be the case. So that will be very, very cool. And there's a couple of other things that obviously are going to be recognisable to long-term players of Bethesda games in general. Obviously Skyrim and the Fallout series, and further back in the Elder Scrolls as well. You know, the things that define a Bethesda game as being a Bethesda game will be, it's definitely going to have those hallmarks. So that's very, very cool. So one of the big things they're talking about in this new video is the exploration angle.
Yeah, a lot of our games are about exploration, and that's sort of like, that's the ultimate exploration, is what's out there, what's past Earth, right? So it's incredibly exciting for us to work on something like that.
Exploration is a big thing in all of Bethesda's games. Obviously, look at Skyrim, look at the Fallout series, getting out into these open worlds, wandering around, stumbling across whatever you come across, and the stories that those locations tell, and then having many of those locations, I've been thinking recently in particular, being sort of characters in their own right in a lot of ways. They often have their own sort of unique qualities and stories and histories and characters, frankly. So I think we can count on Bethesda to try and continue doing that sort of thing in Starfield. It's their MO, as it were. So that should be very, very cool as well. And obviously, exploration should be particularly cool in something like a space game or a sci-fi game like Starfield. So lots and lots of potential to lean heavily into that. So it should open up a lot of possibilities for sort of doing your own thing, finding and telling your own stories and that sort of thing, which is something Bethesda love doing. And, obviously with all their previous games, you've got huge amounts of freedom in character customization and designing your character to play your own way. In previous interview a couple of weeks ago, Todd Howard mentioned briefly the skill system for Starfield, saying it would be somewhat recognisable to players of their previous games, particularly like Skyrim, stuff like that. Obviously, it's not going to be the same. It will be unique and geared towards the universe of Starfield, but that ability to build yourself out and be the character you want to be, hopefully, sounds like it's going to persist into Starfield, which we don't expect, but that should be very, very cool, and they should really open up the possibility of having a much longer lifespan game. Very, very cool. So we know as well that the game's going to be based in sort of realistic science. The science fiction is going to have recognisable traits in comparison to real-world technology, that sort of thing. So it'll seem like a sensible evolution from where we are now. That's the idea.
It's got a more realistic, science-based backing to it, whereas Skyrim is sort of an epic fantasy. This is a more grounded game and a grounded setting.
Yeah, that should work really well. It's like some people love their sci-fi to be really sci-fi, and that's great, but that's sort of more grounded in reality sci-fi often does very, very well. There's some big series that have done that in the past and really done it well and been very successful off of it, and it's a style of sci-fi I really like, so I'm looking forward to that. I mean, seeing the concept art, and we will in a moment when we dive into it, that there is a lot of familiarity to the sort of fundamentals and the building blocks of the universe, which is really, really cool, particularly in terms of technology and things like that. So very, very cool to see, and there's some interesting stuff in there. So yeah, looking forward to that. So some of the other stuff they talked about in this video yesterday is mostly around the world building and the tone and the attitude they take towards that world building. So obviously there's references to things like how they like to pick up the coffee cups, stuff like that, and there's a little Skyrim footage in there demonstrating what they mean by that. But interactable worlds is stuff that we're familiar with Bethesda games, and they've kind of hinted at before for Starfield as well, so we can expect more of that as well. And you can touch the things in the world rather than just having them be static visual objects, which is going to be very, very cool and very, very much the BGS world building style that we know and love. I've also done the usual thing that they do with lore and world building in, I think Elder Scrolls is perhaps the better example here again, rather than Fallout, because that's building on something that pre-existed from other people's work before Bethesda got their hands on the IP. Obviously, look at the Elder Scrolls, Skyrim for a prime example again. There are about a bajillion books in there, all with tons of snippets of lore that add to the universe, and there's sort of a basic understanding that the characters in the universe have of their own universe. So there are the facts of life, the things that are entertainment, the stories that they tell their kids, the shared history of the world. And obviously Bethesda are leaning heavily into that, as they always do, again in Starfield, to build up this world that the characters are familiar with, and they all live in this same universe. So it kind of sounds obvious in a sense, but it's all really part of bringing everything together and making a believable world for the player to explore, which they are really into and really leaning into with this one. And you can see it in a lot of the concept art and the level of depth that they've gone into in the design. I mentioned things like concept art for things like the food and the children's toys. We know they do that from Fallout. And going into things like the stories they tell and the entertainment media they have and things like that. And that really kind of ties a world together and makes it more living, breathing and believable. So very, very cool to hear little bits about that. Again, not massive details, but sort of a sense of the universe they're trying to build. And as I say, if on the off chance I'm not conveying their mood in quite the right way, then of course I'll link the video down below, as I say, so do check that out. It's about 7 minutes long, so it's worth looking at. Obviously somewhat marketing orientated, of course it is, but getting that vibe that the team at Bethesda are trying to put together for this universe is very, very cool and worth it. And really gets the feeling of that sort of same mentality that led to the games that came before that we know and love. So a few other bits and pieces. They talked about how the world will be sort of mechanically new, and from this I think we're talking more about the fundamental building blocks of the world again, as opposed to game mechanics.
The mechanics of the world are entirely different. but there are similarities.
Obviously, we've talked before about how the skill system is going to be recognisable to long-term Bethesda players, even if it's unique and new to Starfield. But with the mechanically new world, what I suspect Todd Howard in this case was referring to is things like the sci-fi basis, and how if you look at Skyrim, you've got a fantasy world, there's magic is a fact of the world, there's the different planes of existence, the Oblivion planes and Daedra and Aedra and all that stuff, and dragons. None of that's going to be appearing in Starfield, obviously. But there are certain other realities of the universe that are fundamental to the way that universe will work, that inform a lot of what's going to be going on in the game and the environment we're going to be exploring and the way we explore it and that sort of thing. And I think that's what he's referring to with mechanically new. So in a sense, the feel and the nature of the world is going to be something new from Bethesda, but obviously in that Bethesda vibe. So very much looking forward to getting my hands on this. If you can't tell, we're really hyped for this. Massive sci-fi nerd anyway, as well as a fantasy nerd as well. I love that sort of thing too. But yeah, getting my hands on Bethesda's take on space is something I'm hugely hyped for. So, two last points I did want to bring up. One that we're going to kind of circle back to is, I know a lot of people have asked questions about whether or not we're going to have robot companions, whether or not we might be able to customize those, things like that. Obviously, they've not gone into vast amounts of detail on this yet, but sort of an interest in robotics and knowledge of that sort of thing is something that apparently certain members of the team at Bethesda have, and that they are bringing into the game. So, how much that might infer into companions and the like, we don't know. We already know about Vasco, or we think his name's Vasco, the robot we see in the trailer wandering around, and he seems to be a companion of sorts, maybe the ship's mechanic, something like that. But we see a little note written for him on a mirror in the trailer, and you see him wandering onto the ship, stuff like that. So we know there's going to be some robotic elements in there, which should be very, very cool. It makes sense in this kind of developing sci-fi world that's grounded in our world. Robotics being a significant part of future technology is not a great stretch, so it makes sense to have that in there, and it's very, very cool. As to whether or not it's going to be companions, who knows? There's a really cool little concept art's perhaps not like the right word for this, but it's a little clip of a robot moving, so I suppose it's sort of modelling and figuring out how what would appear to be Vasco here will move and look and that sort of thing in this universe. So that's going to be interesting to see as well, and I'll throw that up on the screen if I haven't already. So yeah, very, very cool, tiny little snippet, but nice to have a little look at the robots there and perhaps a little bit more detail outside of a trailer, so we get kind of a vibe for maybe how that's going to feed into the larger game, which is cool. And last but not least, the other teaser, I suppose, that Todd Howard dropped in here was talking about the step-out moments.
You always have that step-out moment into the world, so to say. I like to say that Starfield has two step-out moments.
And these are one of the set pieces that Bethesda always do, and they always do really well and really spectacularly. So obviously, those of you who are Fallout 3 fans will remember that first time you stepped out of Vault 101 and the Capital Wasteland opened up before you. That was quite the moment, and you could see off into the distance to where like the Washington Monument's poking up over the ruins of sort of downtown DC and stuff, or when you first step out of that cave escaping from Helgen in Skyrim, and the woods in basically the Falkreath region open up in front of you, and you really get this vibe of the Nordic landscape for the first time. Apparently, we have two such moments in Starfield. Obviously, one of those is going to be early on, I suspect, just after you've got your character together and they emerge into whatever the world of Starfield's going to be for the first time. But it sounds like there's going to be a second one as well. Well, there is, according to Todd Howard. And he's being cryptic about it, because of course he is, that's Todd Howard all over. But it'll be interesting to see what he might be referring to there, and to speculate, as that could certainly be a lot of different things. Possibly when you first get out into your spaceship and get sort of out into space, and the sort of wider galaxy opens up in front of you, or whatever form that's going to take. We don't really know. We know there's multiple star systems to be visiting, but other than that, obviously planets from that. We're going to see in the concept art, it looks like there's concept art for smaller planets, maybe moons, things like that, certainly based on the trailer as well. Perhaps that have less atmosphere, planets are presumably going to have more, so I imagine there's going to be a lot of variety in there. But yeah, opening up those possibilities to go and explore, I suspect is going to be a step-out moment to a degree. But it could also be referring to something else that we can't think of, I can't think of, that could be completely coming in from a different angle. So very interesting to see what that might be, and yeah, very much looking forward to getting into it. That's everything I wanted to cover regarding the new video that Bethesda put out yesterday. Some fairly interesting stuff in there. Not massively surprising, but interesting to get a little look at some of the world building that Bethesda are doing and the environment we're going to be exploring. So for the next one, which will probably be on Friday, we're going to take a look at all the concept art Bethesda have released in the last few weeks, and there's quite a chunk of it, which is why I'm separating it out into a second video. But yeah, that's going to be really cool. There's some really amazing art. Bethesda always do some amazing stuff with that, so looking forward to diving into that one. But as I say, that'll probably be Friday. So for now, I'll say a massive thank you very much for watching. Hope you found this as interesting as I did, and as excited for Starfield as I am. I can't wait to get myself stuck into that one. If you did like the video, please do consider dropping subs, likes, and all that good stuff. I very much appreciate it. You'll also find social media links, the merch store, and channel memberships all down below the video as well. If you are interested in supporting the channel that way, I hugely appreciate it, and it really helps out. So massive thank you to everyone who's done that already. And of course, do watch out for the live streams as well. Do come join us for those. We are playing 76 as always, and enjoying The Witcher as well at the moment as well. So I do hope you'll join us for those. But for now, thank you very much for watching. I look forward to speaking to you all very, very soon.